I want to tell you about something that happened to my older cousin, Mark. This was back in 2011, when he was still the kind of guy who spent every free weekend outdoors. Mark loved hiking alone. He always said it helped him think, helped him breathe. I used to tease him about it, told him he was asking to star in his own horror movie. He'd just laugh and say I worried too much. This happened on a cold morning in early March. Mark drove out before sunrise and parked his truck at the end of a cracked gravel service road near a place locals called Pinnajaw Ridge. It's that way, out near the Kentucky-West Virginia line, deep enough that most people didn't even know it existed. There were no signs, no trail markers, nothing inviting you in. Just trees, thick ones, the kind that block sound and light. He told me later that the woods felt normal at first. Quiet, but not the bad kind of quiet. The kind hikers like. Birds, wind in the branches, boots crunching on frozen dirt. He'd checked the weather obsessively the night before. Clear skies everywhere. No storms, no snow. Nothing weird. He packed like he always did. Water, snacks, extra socks, a headlamp, a compass he'd carried for years, and a few emergency flares his girlfriend at the time insisted he bring. They'd argued about him hiking alone more than once. She hated it. He promised her he was careful. About an hour and a half in, he passed a low stone wall, half fallen over and swallowed by vines and brush. It looked old, like it had been there longer than anyone alive. That was when things started feeling off. The air changed, not colder, just heavier. The wind picked up out of nowhere, pushing through the treetops in long, steady breaths. Then snow started falling. At first, Mark thought it was just a few flakes. No big deal. But when he looked up, the sky wasn't right. It wasn't cloudy or stormy. It was just gray, flat, like someone had erased the color. The snow got thicker fast. Wet flakes stuck to his jacket and weighed down the branches until they bent and cracked. He said it felt like the woods were holding their breath. Mark decided to turn back. The trail was already getting hard to see, and his gut told him not to push it. That's when he noticed the footprints. They were behind him. Not his. He knew his own stride. These prints were longer, spaced farther apart. Whoever made them walked like they knew exactly where they were going. No slipping, no pauses, just steady steps. And there hadn't been anyone else out there. Mark was sure of that. He followed the prints for a bit, not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't stop himself. Then they left the trail and went straight into the trees, not wandering, not searching, just straight in, like a path only they could see. That's when his compass started acting wrong. The needle wouldn't settle. It kept drifting, pulling west no matter how he held it. His phone had no signal. When he tried to open his GPS, it froze and shut down. That's when he started feeling nervous. Not panic. Just that tight feeling in your chest when something isn't right. He tried to retrace his steps, looking for a rotting log he remembered near a fork in the trail. It should have been right there. It wasn't. The ground was smooth, untouched, like the forest had wiped itself clean. Then he heard footsteps, slow, heavy, crunching snow. They weren't coming closer. They were moving alongside him, matching his pace. Like something was walking with him, just out of sight. Mark hid behind a tree and held his breath. The steps circled once, then faded. That's when he made a run for downhill, aiming for a creek he knew should be there. Water always leads somewhere, right? Except there was no creek. He walked and slid thick brush for half an hour, maybe longer. The woods got darker, quieter. The snow kept falling, but it made no sound when it hit the ground. That's when the footprints came back. Only now they weren't normal. Sometimes there were just two deep marks, far apart, like something had landed from above. Other times the prints stopped suddenly, as if whoever made them had vanished mid-step. Mark took shelter under a rock ledge to rest his hands. His fingers were numb, He tried lighting a flare. One died instantly. Another burned weakly and went out. He saved the last one. That's when he heard tapping above him. Soft, careful. He looked up and saw 5 handprints pressed into the snow on the edge of the rock. The fingers were too long, too thin, and the snow beneath them had been brushed clean first, like whatever made them wanted a clear place to touch. Mark ran. He crashed through trees, slid down a muddy slope, and slammed into the ground hard enough to knock the air out of him. When he looked up, he was in a clearing. In the middle sat the broken remains of an old shack. Just beams and boards, half buried in snow. He crawled underneath and cracked a hand warmer, shaking so hard he could barely hold it. That's when he saw the drag mark in the snow nearby, like something heavy had been pulled toward the trees. The trail ended suddenly, like it had sunk into the earth. Then came the whistle. Low, 2 notes. He lit his last flare. Red light spilled across the clearing. Snow fell from branches around him, 1 drop at a time, like something moving just outside the glow. Then the snow stopped in midair, just stopped. Everything went silent. Mark didn't wait. He ran downhill until his legs gave out, until he saw the road and his truck sitting there, untouched. No footprints around it. Nothing. He drove straight to a ranger station and told them everything. They searched the next day. They found nothing. Mark sold his hiking gear a month later. He doesn't go into the woods alone anymore. And every time it snows unexpectedly, he gets real quiet, like he's listening for something that might still remember his footsteps. I'm going to tell you this the way I tell it to friends now, usually late at night, when the room is quiet and nobody feels like laughing too much. Back in 2013, my older cousin Mark talked me into going on a winter hike with him. Mark was one of those people who always needed a goal. At the time, he was training for a big cross-country trail he planned to do in the summer. I, on the other hand, had just quit my job and was sleeping way too late every day. When Mark said a few days in the woods might reset my brain, I figured he was probably right. I'd been hiking before, but never in the dead of winter. And definitely not in January. Still, I said yes. We drove out to a remote stretch of state land near a place called Briar Hollow, miles away from anything that felt like a town. The road ended in a wide patch of mud and ice, and that's where we parked. No signs, no other cars. Just trees pressing in close, like they were already watching us. Mark said there was an old shelter deep in the woods. He claimed he'd slept there once years ago with some college friends. I didn't really believe him. I pictured a pile of rotting boards, or maybe nothing at all. But we hiked anyway, about 8 miles in, the cold biting through our jackets the whole way. When we finally found the shelter, it was worse and better than I expected. It was still standing, but just barely. The roof sagged, weighed down by dead branches. The stone walls were cracked and dark with moisture. It sat in a low dip in the land, almost hidden, like it didn't want to be found. There were no signs, no trail markers, nothing to tell you it was there. If you weren't looking for it, you'd walk right past. We built a fire with damp pine and tried to laugh about how stupid we were. That first night passed quietly, too quietly. No wind, no animals, no distant sounds at all. The sky was clear, and the stars looked sharp and close, like broken glass scattered overhead. We shared a little whiskey, talked about old family stories, and eventually fell asleep. The second day started normal enough. We planned a loop trail, heading down one side of a ridge and circling back. Around noon, snow started falling. At first it was pretty. Then it wasn't. The snow got thicker. The woods blurred together. Trees started to look the same, like copies of each other. Our boots made the only sound, a soft crunch that felt too loud. Mark checked his GPS watch a lot, but even he got quieter as the day went on. By the time we got back to the shelter, it was almost dark. My fingers were numb. Mark's beard had tiny icicles hanging from it. That's when I saw the footprints. One set, big boots, fresh, right outside the shelter. I stopped walking. My stomach dropped. We hadn't seen anyone all day. No voices, no tracks, no gunshots, nothing, and there was no easy way to get there without hiking for hours. Mark tried to brush it off. Sighed maybe a hunter came through. But the tracks didn't come from the trail. They came straight down the steep hill behind the shelter. A place so sharp and slick, you'd have to be crazy to climb it in snow. We followed the prints uphill. They stopped, not faded, not covered, just stopped. Like whoever made them stepped into thin air. Neither of us said a word after that. We went back, started a fire, and ate dinner without really tasting it. That night, the wind howled through the hollow. The shelter groaned and creaked like it was breathing. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to a sound I can still hear clearly. A loud crack, then another, then another. 3 snaps, evenly spaced, like someone breaking frozen branches by hand. I sat up slowly. My heart felt like it was trying to escape my chest. Across from me, Mark was awake. His eyes were wide. I whispered, "Did you hear that?" He nodded. We didn't move. We didn't speak. Eventually, exhaustion pulled us back into sleep. Morning came too bright. The snow had stopped, and everything looked frozen and perfect. That's when we noticed the firewood was gone. Every piece, cleanly taken, no tracks, no mess. While Mark packed up, I walked behind the shelter and found a folded scrap of yellow paper shoved into a crack in the stone. Written in pencil were 2 words and a date. Evan Mercer, 1966. Mark told me to drop it. Said people leave junk like that all the time. We left immediately. On the way out, the woods felt wrong. Familiar things were out of place. Trees we remembered passed on the wrong side. Rocks turned around. I finally said something. Mark snapped. "Don't." About a mile from the car, I saw another note pinned to a tree. Clean white paper. A shiny tack. It had my name on it. My full name, no date. We didn't talk the whole drive home. We haven't hiked together since. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if those notes are still out there, or if they're waiting for us to come back. Back in 2016, when I was 33, I decided I needed a break from everything. My name's Jake, and at the time I was freshly divorced, tired and restless in a way sleep didn't fix. My older sister kept telling me to get out of my apartment and clear my head, so I told her I'd do a short solo hike and check in when I was back. I picked a stretch of trail I'd never walked before, part of the Blue Ridge Trail near a tiny place called Pine Hollow. It's one of those towns with 1 diner, 1 gas station, and more trees than people. I'd hiked plenty before, so I wasn't worried. The weather report said cold but clear, maybe some light snow overnight. Nothing serious. I packed simple gear. A warm jacket, dry socks, a small stove, and an emergency bivy just in case. I filled a thermos with coffee, parked at a gravel pull-off, and signed the trail log. Only 1 other name had been written there all week. I remember thinking it felt lonely, but in a peaceful way. The first couple of hours were fine. Quiet. Too quiet, actually. Once the sound of cars faded, it felt like the woods swallowed everything. My boots crunching in the snow sounded loud, like they didn't belong there. That's when the snow started falling harder. Thick flakes, slanting sideways, sticking to my eyelashes and jacket. Within minutes, the trail started to disappear. I tried checking my phone, but there was no signal. That should have bothered me more than it did. I told myself the shelter was close and decided to keep going. I figured I'd get there, make something warm, and wait it out. That's when things started feeling wrong. The woods began to look the same no matter where I turned. Every tree felt familiar, like I'd already walked past it. I noticed a twisted pine leaning low over the trail, bent in a strange way, almost like it had tried to crawl. I passed it and kept going. A while later, I saw it again. Same bend, same broken branch, same snow clinging to one side. My stomach dropped. I stopped walking and listened. The forest felt tense, like it was holding its breath. Then I heard it. One single crunch behind me. Slow, heavy, the sound of a boot stepping down. I spun around. Nothing. Just snow drifting down and trees staring back at me. I started walking faster. I told myself I was imagining things. But every time I stepped, I heard another crunch just after mine. Not matching my pace. Not steady. Like someone was following, but trying not to be noticed. My gloves soaked through. My coffee ran out. My hands shook, and not just from the cold. When I finally spotted the shelter, I nearly laughed from relief. It was a small wooden lean-to, half buried in snow. I rushed inside, dropped my pack, and leaned over, breathing hard. That's when I felt it. Warmth. The back wall felt warm, like someone had a heater running behind it. I pressed my hand flat against the logs, confused. Then I heard a low humming sound. Deep, steady, like a machine running somewhere close. I stepped outside to look around. That's when I saw them. Two figures standing in the snow about 10 yards away. At first, I thought they were backpacks. Then I realized they were people, standing straight up, buried to their waists in snow, facing the shelter. They weren't moving. There were no footprints, no snow on their shoulders. Their coats were zipped up neatly. Their hands hung stiff at their sides. It looked like someone had placed them there carefully, like mannequins. I backed away and ran into the shelter. Inside, everything was cold again. No warmth, no humming. I grabbed my pack and ran downhill, off the trail, branches slapping my face. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed away from that place. Eventually, I stumbled onto a frozen fire road. Headlights appeared through the snow. A ranger truck slowed beside me. The driver rolled down the window. It was Tom, an old family friend who'd known me since I was a kid. He didn't ask questions, just said, "You came off the ridge, didn't you?" I nodded. He looked at me for a long moment. "You see anyone else up there?" I told him everything. He didn't look surprised. He just told me to get in the truck and turn the heat all the way up. We drove in silence the rest of the way. I never went back to that trail, and I still don't hike alone anymore. We only planned to be out there for one night. Just one simple winter hike. That was the whole idea. No big adventure. No danger. Just a quiet break from normal life. This happened in 2016. I was 24 at the time, and I really needed a reset. Work was exhausting. My apartment felt too small, and my head never stopped buzzing. My coworker Lila suggested we go hiking. She was one of those people who always seemed calm, like nothing ever rattled her. She said the cold helped her think. She picked the place, a lookout called Crow Hollow Ridge. She found it on a local hiking forum where people swore it was beautiful in winter. "Snow makes it peaceful," someone had written. That should have been a warning. It wasn't just the two of us. Lila brought her older brother, Evan. I'd met him once before at a barbecue. He was friendly, kind of awkward, always trying to keep the mood light. He joked a lot, but quietly, like he didn't want to bother anyone. That morning was cold but bright. The kind of cold that makes your nose sting when you breathe in. Lila picked me up in her old SUV. The heat barely worked, so we kept our gloves on the whole drive. Evan sat in the back, sipping gas station coffee and humming along to the radio. We reached the trailhead just after noon. The parking lot was empty, which felt a little strange for a weekend, but we brushed it off. Winter hikes weren't popular. The snow on the ground was thin and crunchy, like someone had sprinkled sugar over dirt. The trail started out nice enough. Tall trees, no leaves, just bare branches scratching against the gray sky. Everything was quiet, not peaceful quiet, more like the kind where you notice your own breathing too much. Our boots crunched loudly with every step. Every now and then, we passed old wooden trail signs. The paint was chipped and faded, the letters barely readable. One of them had names carved into it, deep and rough, like someone really wanted to be remembered. I remember touching the grooves with my glove and feeling a weird chill that had nothing to do with the weather. About halfway up, snow started falling. At first, it was kind of pretty. Big soft flakes drifting down slowly. Lila laughed and said we had perfect timing. Evan took a photo, but when he showed us, the picture was just white blur and his half-frozen face. As we climbed higher, the snow got heavier. The wind picked up. The trees started to creak and sway, making low groaning sounds like they were shifting their weight. The trail narrowed, and the ground became slick. When we finally reached the lookout, we didn't stay long. The view was gone, swallowed by fog and falling snow. Everything beyond a few feet just disappeared. It felt like standing at the edge of nothing. Something about the quiet bothered me. It wasn't calm. It felt heavy, like pressure on my ears. We decided to head back down. That's when things started to go wrong. At first, I just noticed the trail was harder to see. The snow covered it evenly, filling in footprints almost as soon as we made them. I kept glancing back to make sure Lila and Evan were still behind me. Then I realized I couldn't hear them. No footsteps, no talking, no joking from Evan. I stopped walking. The forest felt different now, closer. The trees seemed packed tighter together, their branches tangled like reaching arms. Snow fell faster, straight down, no sound at all. I turned around and called Lila's name. Nothing, no answer, no echo. My voice sounded flat and wrong, like it didn't belong out there. I checked my phone. No signal. Battery almost dead. I shoved it back into my pocket, my hands shaking so badly, I almost dropped it. I told myself not to panic. People get separated all the time. They had to be nearby. That's when I saw footprints ahead of me. They weren't mine. They were shallow, uneven, like someone wearing old sneakers. Fresh, leading away from where the trail should have been. I thought maybe Evan had wandered off. Maybe he was messing around, so I followed them. The footprints led off the trail and into thicker woods. The snow was deeper there, reaching halfway up my boots. The air felt colder, sharper. The forest was dead silent. Then I noticed something else. Another set of footprints beside the first. Bare feet. The toes were too long, too wide, pressed deep into the snow, like whatever made them was heavy. Each step looked like it hurt to take. I stood there, staring, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. When I turned around, the footprints behind me were gone. No trail, no marks. Just smooth snow, like I'd never been there at all. I started walking fast. I didn't care where. I just needed to move. That's when I saw the cabin. It sat crooked between the trees, half hidden by snow. The wood was dark and weathered. One window was boarded up. The other looked black, like it swallowed light. The door hung open slightly, swaying in the wind. I ran inside. The air was stale and cold. There was a bench, a rusted shovel, and an old fireplace with ashes inside. No warmth, no signs anyone had been there recently. But it felt safer than the woods. I closed the door and slid down against it, trying not to cry. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, heavy, more than one. They stopped right outside. The door creaked, bending inward like something was leaning against it. Then came tapping, soft at first. Fingertips brushing along the wall, moving, circling, I pressed my hands over my mouth and counted in my head over and over. When it stopped, the silence felt worse than the noise. I opened the door just a crack. Outside, the snow was marked with bare footprints circling the cabin. They ended suddenly, like whatever made them vanished. Then I heard my name. It was Evan's voice, but it came from deep in the woods. I didn't answer. When the sky started to darken, I walked downhill until I hit the road. Search teams found me later that night, frozen and shaking. Lila and Evan had made it back hours earlier. I told everyone I got lost. I never told them about the footprints. Or the cabin. I looked it up later. Maps, records, nothing. Crow Hollow Ridge doesn't have a cabin. And I haven't gone hiking since. It happened in early March of 2016, not long after winter had started pretending it was over. I was hiking near a place called Pine Hollow Ridge, somewhere outside a tiny town named Brindle Creek, deep in the eastern Kentucky hills. If you've never heard of it, that's kind of the point. Most people haven't. It's the kind of place where the woods stretch forever and the roads seem to forget where they're going. My name's Evan, and at the time, I was 27. I wasn't out there for fun exactly, but I wasn't miserable either. My cousin Lana had asked me for a favor. She worked part-time for a local historical group, mapping old hiking paths that had fallen off official maps years ago. A lot of them were barely used anymore, and some weren't used at all. She needed someone to walk them, take notes, and make sure they still existed. I liked hiking, and I trusted Lena. She grew up around these hills and knew more about them than most locals. So when she asked, I said yes. We weren't especially close, but we'd always gotten along, and I figured it would be a good excuse to get away from work and clear my head. By my third day out there, I felt tired but good. I'd been moving at an easy pace, camping at night in a small tent, cooking simple meals, and writing down whatever stood out. Fallen signs, broken markers, old clearings that looked like they hadn't seen a human in years. That afternoon, though, something felt off. I remember walking along a narrow trail when the light started to change. At first, I didn't think much of it. The hills there rise and fall constantly, and shadows shift all the time. But this felt different. The light didn't drop suddenly. It faded slowly, like someone turning down a dimmer switch. I stopped and looked up. The sky had turned a dull gray, thick and heavy, and I honestly couldn't remember when the clouds had rolled in. Snow started falling a few minutes later. Just a few flakes at first. Quiet, almost pretty. Then it got heavier, faster, the kind of snow that doesn't drift gently, but comes straight at your face. The wind picked up too. Not strong enough to knock me over, but enough to bite through my jacket. My gloves were damp, and my boots felt soaked. Worse, I couldn't see the trail markers anymore. Everything started blending together. Trees, rocks, snow. I knew I'd passed an old service cabin earlier that day, maybe half a mile back. It was marked on Lena's notes as collapsed and unsafe. I didn't like the idea of turning around in that weather, but I liked the idea of getting lost even less. That's when I saw something down the slope to my right. At first, it just looked like a darker patch between the trees. Then it took shape. A small building half hidden by snow-covered pines. It leaned slightly, like it was tired of standing. The roof sagged, and one side looked darker than the rest, stained by years of rain. I didn't think. I just went for it. By the time I reached the cabin, snow clung to my sleeves and backpack. My fingers felt stiff, and my jacket zipper refused to move. The cabin was maybe the size of a large shed. The wood was old and pale, almost the color of bone. The door had a chain wrapped around the handle, but it wasn't locked. It looked more like someone had looped it there out of habit and forgotten to secure it. I knocked. No answer. Inside, the air felt wrong. Not cold, not warm, just held. like the air had been sitting there for a long time, waiting. I noticed a low humming sound almost right away, soft and steady, like a fridge running somewhere nearby. The room was just one space, a narrow cot against the wall, a rusty camping stove near the center, a broken table leaning at an angle, a metal bucket on the floor, catching water dripping slowly from the ceiling. The place looked empty, but not abandoned. There were no personal items, no trash, no food, just the bare minimum. Like someone came here often, but didn't stay long. I took off my boots and peeled off my socks. They were soaked. I laid them near the stove, even though I could tell it hadn't been used in a while. My phone had no signal. Not surprising, but still unsettling. I figured I'd rest for a bit, let the storm pass, then head back toward the trail once things cleared. I sat on the cot and started writing in my notebook, trying to describe the place. That's when the humming stopped. Not suddenly. Just gone. The silence that followed felt thick, like it pressed against my ears. I looked around, expecting something to explain it. A switch, a cord, anything. Then I heard movement. It wasn't loud, just a soft shift, like fabric brushing against wood. I stood up and scanned the room. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. No closets, no back room, no trapdoor. I told myself it was the wind or the building settling. Old places make noise. Everyone knows that. A few minutes passed. Then I heard breathing, slow, calm, steady. It didn't sound like an animal. It sounded like a person standing very still, trying not to be noticed. The sound came from the wall behind the bucket. That didn't make sense. I'd seen the outside. There was nothing there. I leaned closer, my heart pounding, and pressed my ear to the wood. I heard a faint scrape, like someone shifting their weight. I stepped back fast. That's when I noticed the dehumidifier by the stove. It was old, yellowed with age, but a small light on the side glowed softly. The full light. I opened the tank. It was empty. Something moved behind me. Not fast, not loud. Just enough to let me know it was there. The door wouldn't open at first. It felt stuck, like something heavy leaned against it from the outside. When I finally broke free and ran, I didn't look back. I didn't stop running until I reached the old service cabin I'd passed earlier. I didn't sleep that night. And I never went back to Pine Hollow Ridge. I told Lena I was done. She didn't argue. She just said very quietly, "Yeah, I figured."